Okay, so I said on last week's preview show that I fancied Huntly to win this one, having lost Inverurie Locos in the GPH Builders Merchants Highland League Cup a week previous. Not to boast, I think Callum, to be fair, also perhaps predicted a Huntly win. But yeah, I thought, especially in the second half, Huntly had much more chances, more cutting edge in the final third, and they took 3 of those chances.
Yeah, I mean, when you watch the highlights, I don't think there's any disputing at all that the right team won that game. Huntly were a threat every time they went forward. Big Andy Hunter obviously loves playing against the Locos, and I mean, he took his goals well. Could have had another one, yeah, it did bounce off his hand, but he was just a constant threat. And Foster out wide as well. They're a very potent attack, Huntly, these days. If they can tighten up defensively, I think they can have a really decent season. But yeah, they're a threat. They're going to be a threat, whoever they play.
It has been an incredible start so far for Huntly. Still unbeaten after 4 games, and before we come on to Alan Hale, their manager had to say about it just briefly. Brodie Allen, the third goal for Huntly. Not sure if he quite meant to finish it that way, but it looked fantastic on the replay, didn't it?
Oh, it does. And what's the coaching manual say? When the ball comes in, hit it down into the ground, and it make it hard for the goalkeeper. Whether he meant it or not, I don't know, but it certainly had the desired effect as it loops over and into the net. Yeah.
Okay, so Alan Hale, as I mentioned, said he'd have snapped your hand off for their record so far after 4 games. I mean, they've beaten Rothes, a team who subsequently have started looking pretty decently strong. The 2-2 draw with Brechin obviously stands out. Not many teams will take points off Brechin this season, you'd imagine, based on last season. 2-1 win over Lossiemouth as well, as we'll see later on, and we'll discuss. Lossiemouth are also looking handy, so yeah. And now the Locos. On the other hand, Locos without a point still, and I think, as you'll have seen also, Andy Lowe's post-match interview, quite telling, talking about hopefully the club gives them the opportunity to improve things. Has been acceptable. He wasn't yet concerned, he said, that he won't get the chance to turn things round, but also said he'd understand if the club don't think it's good enough. I mean, that's ominous stuff for me, but I mean, I think what we can all sort of accept is that Locos would have been expecting a better start as one of the more well-resourced clubs in the Highland League.
I think so. And it is worrying to hear any manager after 4 games almost like nervously looking over their shoulder, but you can understand it because this is uncharted territory for Locos. I don't think we really have ever seen them struggling with no points after 4 games. A bit of patience needs to be done. There's clearly a lot of work needing to be done at Harlaw Park, and Andy's a proven manager at that club and at that level. So personally, I'd be giving him time. There's changes need to be made. There's a team there that needs to gel and get a bit of confidence. But how long do you go if you're losing every week? And Andy knows that if you're losing every week, then somebody somewhere's going to go, right, we need to change something here. And 9 times out of 10, we know, unfortunately, what that ends up being. Not
to, again, go back over old ground and talk about the preview show from last week, but I also said this game would end in a draw, and that Formartine were looking like a team that could potentially take points off Buckie following the Jags' flawless start. And I suppose, thirdly, that Stuart Anderson, I mean, he sort of touches on this in his post-match comments, but having led for so long through Julian Wade, I mean, and the way things played out at the end of the game, the chaos that ensued, I mean, Formartine will be coming away from this one disappointed they didn't take all 3 points.
Oh, definitely. I mean, Julian Wade's goal, first of all, is chef's kiss stuff. I think what a finish. And we joked before we started filming, dare I say, international class. And it is a superb looping header. But yeah, you're playing against 10 men at home, going into the final minute, and I'm sorry to say, Ewan McDonald's had a rush of blood to the head here because he's got to get a connection on that ball when he races out his goal, and when he doesn't, alarm bells are ringing and the ball's in the back of the net 5 seconds later. Buckie got out of jail despite playing well themselves, and Graham Stewart was delighted, but Stuart Anderson must be pig sick at that one, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, before we leave the sort of Formartine side of things, I mean, Stuart Anderson also said after the game that, similar to the Alan Hale comments, if you'd looked at their opening fixtures, the first 5 games, and you'd said to him, 10 points, he would have said, yeah, I'll take that. I mean, they've played Buckie at the weekend. They played Brecon earlier, I'm pretty sure.
First date.
I wouldn't say that's quite a title hopeful return yet, but I mean, it is early in the season, and there's a chance to get fully up to speed and start rattling off the wins week after week. So I mean, it's promising for Formartine. The Buckie side of things, first of all, the Stuart Knight red card. I mean, interesting one, because it didn't look like Stuart Knight was particularly happy with the decision. I mean, you wouldn't be getting sent off, would you? But I presume the referee has adjudged that to be a sort of, because it's clearly accidentally. Clearly has stepped out of his box and not realised how far out he's come.
I don't know if he has stepped out. I think his feet are actually in the line, but his hands have possibly come out
it's difficult
beyond
to tell
the line.
from our angle,
Yeah.
but the referee, Joe Kennedy, I think it was, has he just judged that to be a clear goal scoring opportunity? Because even then I'm like, is it? Because is the Formartine player getting there? Would he have got there if Stuart Knight hadn't handled the ball?
We'll never know.
Yeah.
But the assistant is clearly bang in line and has flagged this, because you see the referee look over almost to confirm, okay, and then out comes the red card. But as fine margins go, it can't come much finer for a handball offence for a goalkeeper this season in the Highland League, I don't think.
I think it's safe to say from the footage that Stuart Knight and Jack McIver do not wear the same size top, because he's drowning in that goalie top. But fair play to him. Takes a brave man to do the Robbie Winters and put on the gloves. And
he throws the ball out for the equaliser, remember?
Clean sheet.
Playing for the back.
Well, clean sheet for him in the 5 minutes he's been goal. But yeah, so that's Buckie, 100% record gone. But I mean, I think they'll be reasonably okay with getting a point, given the way the game.
Under the circumstances, 10 men, last minute equaliser, you'll take it away from home every weekend. You'll take it, I think. Yeah,
and that could end up being, come the end of the season, if they end up winning the league by 1 point, that could end up being vital stuff. Okay, let's move on to some of our other title hopefuls, or the teams we think might be title hopefuls this season. Fraserburgh 3, Devonvale 2 at Bellsleigh. Jamie Beagrie and Greg Buchan had the Brock 2-0 up going into the last 10 minutes of this one. Jane Goldie then pulled a goal back for Devonvale in 84 minutes, but then he himself fouls sub Scott Barber and sub Sean Butcher, scores to make it 3-1 to Fraserburgh from the penalty spot. Matthew Peterman got Vale's second in injury time, I believe. But it's an interesting one, this one, because it read like a game. The report read like a game where Fraserburgh were reasonably comfortable, maybe for most of the afternoon till maybe right at the very end. But at the same time, it's one you come away with and you're like, Devonvale, they look competitive.
If you're Mark Cowie at the Brock, you take the points and you move on, and you're looking for an improvement, clearly. And to see that territorial advantage you have being translated into goals in the weeks ahead. For Devonvale, you've pushed a very good Fraserburgh team all the way in their own patch, and I think you can take a lot of positives from that. It'll be interesting to see what happens when the two sides meet again in Princess Royal Park in the Cup at the weekend, because the Vale are clearly making progress from last season. Can they make enough to pull off what would be a cup shock at the weekend? We'll see.
I suppose the thing that's clear about Devonvale so far is they can score goals this season, and that's without Dane Ballard.
I was going to say,
But it's easy to say this, maybe even more easy to say this in previous games rather than Fraserburgh, because Fraserburgh will score a lot more than 3 goals against some teams this season, most likely. But maybe the thing for them is probably to tighten up at the back.
Yeah, absolutely. Devonvale can score, but they have to keep the door shut. It's so obvious. It's football 101, isn't it?
Yeah. Strathspey Thistle 0, Banks of D 6. Banks of D stay undefeated as well this season. I mean, you'd probably have expected them to win this one, certainly when Strathspey, I think, lost 4 players to illness. On Saturday morning, Lachie McLeod with a double, Kane Winton, Mikey Phillipson, Magnus Watson and Chris Antoniazzi with the goals, hopefully. Did I say Lachie McLeod too? I think I did. But yeah, I mean, I think for Strathspey you could probably write that one off.
Yeah, just under the circumstances, They don't have the squad depth. So when you're losing 4 guys on the day of a game, you're going to be in trouble. For Banks of Dee, it's kind of deja vu to last season. They raced out the traps last season. Yes, the points deduction kind of knocked them a wee bit, but they're up and running and they're looking good.
I mean, goals conceded so far in their 4 games, just the 2, and they've scored 15. So, that
was good enough for Brecon to win a championship.
Well, it's impressive stuff, and it has been evident the game so far that they are scoring the goals and they're keeping clean sheets. So good early signs for them. Brecon City 2, Nairn County 0. Nairn, a team still without a point. Sounded like this game really turned on Ben Kelly, having a big early chance that he put wide for Nairn, and Brecon then sort of took charge of the game. Grady McGrath scoring twice, 2 more goals to add to his already sort of reasonably impressive early tally. I think with Brecon, what has maybe been sort of evident with them so far, especially last week as well in our highlights, in the game against Brora Rangers, they're creating a lot of chances, but they're maybe not necessarily taking those chances yet. And I mean, 3 points is the most important thing, as we've discussed time and again. But it does feel like if they can just sort that little thing out, that someone's going to get a hiding from Brecon City.
Andy Kirk touched on that in his his post-match comments, saying, look, we've got to take this pressure in the final third. That final ball's got to be better. The decision making's got to be sharper, really. And but two things come to mind with Brecon, especially at home. If you get a chance as an away team, you've got to take it. And likewise, if you give Grady McGrath an opportunity, you know he's going to take it. And that's the story of that game for me.
Yeah, when I was just looking there, Grady McGrath on 6 goals so far, according to our stat man, Callum. You can probably see from here, so I won't ask you to tell me who the top goal scorer in the Highland League at the moment is.
Doesn't wear black and white, does he?
He does wear black and white.
Sean Butcher?
It's Sean Butcher, yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure he saw it on the screen. Anyway.
I knew it in advance.
Big result of the weekend, Lossiemouth 1, Brora Rangers 1. Big result for Lossiemouth, first point in the league under Frank McKettrick. What a point to get. I mean, we discussed this last week that Lossiemouth had showed against Formartine in losing, that they were competitive and they were probably unfortunate to not take anything from that game. But they've now got a really good point against Brora, and it's a come from behind point as well. James Leslie scored in the second half after Tony Dingwall had scored early on. Towards the end, Brora had a Paul Brindle goal ruled out for offside, and then Jordan McRae got sent off for 2 quick bookings for descent and simulation. But I mean, it's one of those, isn't it, where if you're Lossie, you're delighted, like you're up and running. If you're Brora and you're Ali McDonald, you're pulling your hair out a little bit, because a team as strong as Brora scoring, getting themselves in front against Lossiemouth, it's like, as Ali McDonald said, it's press home your advantage at that point. It's, put the game to bed.
The first goal is so important when it's a team we would regard as a title challenging or contending team is playing away from home. You're thinking, right, they get their noses in front, break down the resistance, and then they can go on from there. But credit to Lossiemouth, given their goal down and they haven't got off the mark yet, to then dig in and come back and get a point will feel like a win in many ways for them, I would imagine.
I suppose in games like that, I mean, I know players don't think like this, but it's easy to go, well, we're not expected to beat Brora Rangers. This is the game that defines our season, so we're a goal down. So that's it gone. But clearly that's not the attitude for the Coasters. Rothes 3, Wick Academy 0. Unbeaten in 3 now for Rothes. Decent draw against Banks of Dee. 3 in the cup against Nairn. Now they've beaten Wick. Sounded like Jake Thompson, I think he scored either side of half time. Then Greg Morrison added a goal, but it just sounded like the Speyside perhaps surprised Wick a little bit. Gary Manson talked about his sort of it had taken him by surprise that Rothes kind of sat back a little bit in the game, and obviously again another cliche, but they've scored at crucial times there, and it kind of seemed to end up being reasonably comfortable for them.
It speaks to a couple of things for me. One, Ross Jack's faith in his defence to soak up anything that can come towards him, and his faith in his forward line to hit on the counter and pick off opposition, and they've got their noses in front and then struck at crucial times to take all 3 points. Perennial slow starters, Rothes, but they seem to be up and running.
Yeah.
So.
it's one of those. It's one of the Callum Law tropes of Highland League Weekly, but like Ross Jack, perhaps our most tactically astute manager. There's another surprise in that game. Gary Manson being given a Guard of Honour by Rothes. That's a nice touch to celebrate his 700th game.
He felt embarrassed, he said.
Yeah.
But, I think that's a nice touch. It's an incredible feat, 700 games.
Don't actually know if he played at the weekend. That would have been 701 after he got, the big number in the middle of the week. Anyway, Forest Mechanics 2, Keith 1, 3 wins from 4 for Forest. Another team like Huntly that started like a house on fire. I think their only defeat so far was Buckie Thistle. All the goals after the break. In this game, Craig McKenzie, I thought it was quite interesting. Craig McKenzie, he set up both of Forest's goals, but after the game, Steve McDonald was, saying that Lee Fraser is the one that they're running out of Man of the Match awards for. He scored the winning header after Callum Frame and James Brownie had exchanged goals. But yeah, I mean, Forest, the thing that struck me about Steve McDonald's quotes after the game was he said they've won the games they wanted to win. If you do that all season, you pick up some bonus points against, the big six. If we can call them that, then that Forest are in a really strong position.
They're going well, and to go back to the Buckie game last midweek, they were leading at Victoria Park as well before Buckie came back to take the points. But the response to losing their first game of the season is an excellent win. In a game where it can be stuffy, it can be tight. It's one of those where the other team's got nothing to lose, but the Cans, I think, are early dark horses for me.
Craig Ewan said after the game that Keith got what they deserved from it. Last week we'd obviously discussed that Keith, the way they kind of built through their 3 games, I think they've gone loss, draw, win, and like it kind of looked like a decent start for them. I suppose what they've got to do with the performance against Forest is put it behind them and not let it become one of those things, as we often see in the Highland League, where like the sort of teams further down the table, that one bad performance turns into like 3-4 bad performances, and you end up going 4 games without picking up a point. Yeah.
What they've got to do more than put that result behind is learn from it, because they get back in level terms on Saturday for 2 minutes, and then they're behind again. That's the biggest frustration, I think, is when you get back into a game, get a bit of control, calm down, and go to build again. Not give away a goal and find yourself having to start all over again.
Turriff United 4, Clanton 1, the final game to discuss. Now this sounded like, I don't normally do this, I don't normally save like a game that actually sounds like it was class until the end, but this game sounded like interesting. What was it? 5 goals, I think, 3 red cards as well, although maybe that I'm making it sound a bit sexier than it actually was in the cold light of day. But the goals, John Allen, Ewan Clark linking up again for Clark's early goal. So that's
2 names we're going to say a lot this season, I
makings
think.
of a good strike partnership there. John Allen coming in, the Shetlander, and so seems to have got a really good relationship with Clark straight away. Allen then scored himself. Keir Smith had Turriff 3-0 up. In the second half, both Murray Cormack of Turriff and Fergus Adams of Clack both picked up second. Bookings were sent off. Callan Gray then puts Turriff 4-0 up with a screamer, apparently, so unsure if we'll see footage. It's Turriff, so we might see footage, so it might be on the screen right now. So that the game was gone at that point, and then Alistair Riddle netted a consolation for Clack. The final red card
Keep going.
to Fergus Alberts at the death. So it's two Ferguses sent off in the game.
Fergus sings the blues.
Hopefully that's correct, because that's got the makings of something that's incorrect in my notes. But if they were both called Fergus, thank God. But yeah, Fergus Alberts in that moment was the person that was tackled, I'm led to believe. He was unhappy with the tackle and not getting the free kick, presumably.
Or treatment.
Yeah, then kicked the ball away. Ended up getting 2 quick bookings, so there must have been a little bit of dissent there. I think the telling thing was in Dean Donaldson, the Turriff manager's post-match quotes. He included a line about how you're not allowed to question referees' decisions anymore. So I think that's probably was at the root of the issue. But Dean Donaldson naturally delighted with 3 wins from 5. Jordan McDonald, on the other hand, Clark's wait for a win continues. He said they were giving themselves mountains to climb with their defending, and he has been saying that. And every time I've seen him speak this season so far, they find themselves and have found themselves behind time and again. And you know, if you're more than 2 goals behind, like reasonably sharpish in a game, like you're not gonna come back and win that game.
You took the words from my mouth. I don't think there's any team in the league can be 3-0 down at half time and expect to come back and get something from it. It very rarely happens, and that's a sore one. But Turriff are going well. Same thing, if they could be a bit tighter at the back, I think they can have a good season, because they've certainly got a goal threat, much like Huntly, I think.
Yeah, I mean, scored 10 so far, but conceded 8, so yeah. We know the number there that needs to improve.